Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.
Well, hello and good evening, everybody, and welcome back to Apex Racing TV, and welcome to the Operation eMotorsports Racing League. This is round number 1 of the season, coming to you tonight from Daytona International Speedway. My name is Ron Mullins. Joining me in the commentary booth is Charles Bichelle, and in the virtual production hall we have our old buddy Lee Thompson. We've got a lot to unpack and explain here before the start of the racing action tonight, but let us say how happy we are to have you all along for a brand new adventure here on Apex Racing TV, and we hope you enjoy not just the next hour and a half on the air, but the next 8 rounds of this championship from now till the end of October. We've got 8 races, 4 classes, and 2 types of cars, but more on that in a few moments' time. But Charles, I'd like to pass things off to you because as a U.S. Army combat vet yourself, I feel like there's no better colleague to have alongside me for this brand new season. Racing for an amazing cause. What are your thoughts heading into this brand new season?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this, Ron. I've actually driven a couple of seasons with these guys. Just enjoy the battles on track. Not a greater group of guys that you want to be racing with. Just having a good time. There's going to be some real tight racing on the track. But at the end of the day, we all kick back and relax and just have some fun, and that's the main goal here.
That is the goal indeed. A lot of these drivers looking to have some fun, and they're also racing for a very good cause as well. So at the top of the show, I feel like it's a very good time to talk about the message and the meaning behind Operation Motorsports. Operation Motorsports is a veteran-led and operated 501c3 nonprofit foundation based in Raleigh, North Carolina and Bryan, Ontario, Canada, serving American and Canadian service members and veterans. Operation Motorsports is based on 3 core values: team, identity, and purpose. And it also supports the recovery of medically retiring or retired service members affected by military service through motorsports opportunities. Operation Motorsports' motto is 1 at a time, so if you ever see hashtag 1 at a time, now you know the meaning behind that hashtag and what it supports, supporting veterans and that wonderful cause that is. Operation Motorsports is fantastic, and we're really happy to have them on board here on Apex Racing TV. Operation Motorsports really has many goals in mind: veteran recovery opportunities that instill a sense of team identity and purpose, veteran recovery opportunities that look through the lens of diversion therapy, motorsports immersion, and academy programs, veteran recovery through motorsports, 1 at a time. Visit operationmotorsports.org to learn more. And now Operation Motorsports is a fantastic organization. We'll be talking about them a lot throughout this season. And Charles, you talked about running with this series before, and not only is it running for a good cause, but the racing product out there on the race course cars is just fantastic as well. So would you like to talk a little bit about what this racing series really is in terms of the cars we have running tonight?
Sure, absolutely. They do. And when I ran, we ran a different set of cars, but they kind of change it up and give everybody a chance to learn some new classes. But for this season, we're going to be running LMP2, and that'll be in the Pro and the Pro Beneficiary categories, and in the Beneficiary categories and in the Open class, which is what I ran. They'll be running the GT3s. So you've got the fast guys out there running in the fast cars. The differentiation between pro and open is pretty simple. To be a pro, you either have to have over 1900 I rating, 3.99 safety rating, or hold a valid real life racing license, which we have a couple of those in here. So that's going to make things a little interesting when you've got the real life pros out there battling with everybody else. That always makes for some exciting racing, and multi-class is always exciting. I was looking through the list of tracks for this season, and it's basically most of the North American tracks, and with the addition of Spa thrown in the mix. So if you're a North American racing fan, follow IMSA a lot, so you're going to see the tracks that you're very familiar with starting tonight here at Daytona.
And Charles, I really appreciate the fact that he brought up some of the wonderful tracks that we'll be visiting throughout this season. Let's just quickly run through the schedule, and of course all of these races are going to be broadcasted here on Apex Racing TV. So it all starts tonight on August the 27th here at the high banks of Daytona International Speedway. Then in 1 week's time, the series is going to be going up to Cheeseland, Wisconsin for the race at Road America. Then they're going to go up north even more to Canadian Tire Motorsports Park on September the 10th. Watkins Glen is going to be the race right after that, followed by another fantastic road course of Road Atlanta down in Braselton, Georgia for the 5th round of the season. Then it is that European trip at Spa on the 1st of October this year. Then we have a small little break for Petit Le Mans in real life, where many of these drivers will possibly be in attendance. More on that a little bit later on throughout this broadcast. And then for the final duo of races, we have Sonoma on October the 25th and Sebring on the 22nd of October to round off this 8-race calendar. And Charles, you pointed it out, a fantastic list of circuits to look forward to all throughout this season. What do you think is the one that you're looking forward to the most?
How can you that's like asking what's your favorite child. There's just some great tracks. I love Watkins Glen. I love CTMP, especially for multi-class racing. CTMP is just so much fun. Very technical track. So yeah, it's just going to be a great calendar from start to finish, and so every race is going to be, I think, very, very, very well done and challenged by a lot of these competitors on the track.
It's certainly going to be a challenge for sure, trying to race at a wide variety of circuits with a whole lot of unique flair. And of course, here at Daytona International Speedway, the first challenge of this very, very new season. And now Daytona is synonymous with sports car racing here in the U.S. 12 turns, including those high banks of, I guess it would be turn number 1 and 2 on the oval and turn 3 and 4 on the oval. This track, always fantastic, of course, holds the Rolex 24 every single winter back in January. And that's usually the race I look forward to the most in terms of the sports car racing calendar, and I think there's no better track to kick this season off. And now these drivers are currently on track for this qualifying session, have been for quite some time, and you can see those lap times getting posted in this LMP2 field. Of course, you've got the Pro and the Pro Beneficiary category with these LMP2 racers. Currently, with the fastest time overall, it is Vic Roy at the top, a 134.593, a little bit of a gap to Mesmer, who's the highest placed Pro Beneficiary driver in that LMP2 car. Currently running the number 75 first, and we'll see if he can improve in that class. Yes, he does, goes to a 135.194, so these drivers slowly starting to eat away at their lap times here in the LMP2 category. I always enjoyed these cars quite a lot, Charles. What are your opinions on the LMP2 and iRacing?
My opinion is I can't drive it. I'm not a prototype driver. So I've driven a few events here. I've driven the 24 Hours of Daytona in the LMP2, albeit by the time I got in the car, it was broken. But still, that's it's one of those things. But I'm much more of, I would say, a GT driver. But once again, it just makes for the gaps between these two classes is what really makes these races exciting, especially when we get to a point to where the LMP2s are starting to work their way through the lap traffic. That always kind of shakes things up a bit.
Yeah, that is going to be a big curveball for all of these drivers. And we haven't even mentioned the race format, 45 minutes long. And we also have a pit stop to contend with. These drivers have limited fuel for the starts of these races all throughout the season. So at least one pit stop will be required for these drivers. But that lap traffic discussion is going to be huge at this track. Really, outside some of the big, heavy braking zones, there's not a whole lot of very good overtaking opportunities around this track. You really have to rely on great corner exits, straight line speed, and getting the draft off the cars in front of you. So that could be a very big factor come time for that 45-minute race we have coming up for you here on Apex Racing TV. Qualifying session still going on. Mesmer in that pro beneficiary category sets another quick lap time, improving to 135.189, my apologies. Currently 2/10 in front of Tyler Gumet in P2 in that pro beneficiary category. Then talking about that pro class in the LMP2s, lots of drivers still setting some times. Here is the Nitro Circus Sim Racing car number 11 being driven by Connor Perry's right now, currently second in class, a tick over a tenth of a second off of Vic Roy at the front. Currently pro class in that LMP2 field, staying about the same as it has been for a few moments, Charles.
Yeah, it's pretty steady right now. We haven't really seen anybody make some big improvements, and I think they've done a good job of kind of staggering themselves so you're not getting a run or anything like that to try and improve your lap times. As we see Connor here working through the bus stop. I'm sorry, the Le Mans chicane. I think that's going to be an off track, maybe a little bit too far on the inside there on the exit. So yeah, the bus stop versus Le Mans chicane still continues to how we're going to call that, and I think that'll be an argument from now until the end of time probably.
Yeah, I think it probably will be in the world of racing and sim racing as well. It's already been a discussion in IMSA circles as well. I think with the most recent modifications to Daytona International Speedway, it should probably be referred to as a lake of asphalt chicane, considering they got rid of all the grass on the back straightaway. But hey, that's a discussion for real life race fans to have, and probably for not us to have here on this broadcast here on Apex Racing TV. Especially considering the LMP2 cars have come down pit lane, and as you can see, the GT3 cars are now out there on the racetrack. We've got the beneficiary class and the open class in those GT3 race cars, and it's gonna be good to see a variety of GT3 cars. I'm trying to remember the last time I did a GT3 broadcast here on Apex Racing TV. It has been quite some time, and ever since then, really over the past year and a half on iRacing has done a whole lot to try and add some new cars, whether it be adding in the reworked Audi R8, whether it be adding in the brand new Ferrari, the Mustang, the Corvette. It's really been nice to see the LM GT3 ranks in iRacing just, I wouldn't say entirely be reworked, but just having a lot of new life breathed into it. I don't know about you, Charles, but it's been pretty awesome to see over the past year and a half.
Absolutely. No, I've really enjoyed the fact that as new cars come into the real life series, iRacing gets a chance to do their work on them and get some good laser scan and some good telemetry and data to build these cars out. And yeah, and I think coming up, we've got the Evo edition of the BMW M4 GT3, so there'll be an upgrade for that, and we're getting the McLaren 720S. So the out with the old McLaren and with the new McLaren. But yeah, it's a pretty nice mix of cars out here. We've got, I think, everybody represented. There's a Ferrari, there's a few Corvettes, Mustangs. So up and down the grid, it's going to be a nice mix. And some tracks are going to favor some cars, and then some tracks will favor others. Like I would say the Mercedes, as we're looking here with Anthony Calvi, probably a good selection for Daytona with that big massive V8 front engine car. always seems to do well here.
Yeah, it's got that straight line speed. That thing is going to be a missile throughout the 45 minutes of racing action that we have. And also this qualifying section, these drivers are going to be fighting for the draft. Unlike the LMP2 field, where it's only 6 cars, the GT3 field is pretty much entirely packed. It is quite significantly larger than the LMP2 class. But I think we should probably talk about the LMP2 results, considering their section of this qualifying session has now been brung to a close. In the end, it was Skylar Vickers grabbing the overall pole in the P2 field. Of course, the pro pole sitter as well at a 134.593. That was his fastest qualifying time. And that's going to be Connor Perez in that number 11 car right behind him. Actually, no, not right behind him. Joining him on that front row, Hunter Reeve is going to be right behind Skylar Vickroy in third. That is going to be the pro beneficiary driver of Meismer, setting the 4th fastest time. He's going to be the highest starting pro beneficiary driver. Martin Wallace was actually the 4th qualifying pro driver, and then Tyler Gumet was actually the 6th place LMP2 qualifier and the 2nd in the pro beneficiary category. So that just wraps a bow on the LMP2 field. But now we're moving on to these much heavier GT3 cars, and already some drivers setting a time. McDade, the first across the line at 145.934.
Yeah, good lap by McDade, and we'll see as the other cars come around what kind of lap times we're going to set. We still have a few cars that are just on their out lap, as we see now with Ole with a 144.26, Little with a 145.43. Now the laps are starting to come in hot and heavy, and Schuring is now at a 1.45.8. So McDade went from first to fourth very quickly there, as we got more laps coming in. So yeah, it looks like it's a pretty at the beginning here, it looks like it's going to be a pretty tight field, which should make things really exciting for us.
And it should be known that currently Kobe All is the fastest GT3 qualifier. However, for some inexplicable reason, he is listed as an... Actually, nope, there we go. We gotta try and get that fixed for you in a few moments. There we go. He's currently the top qualifying beneficiary driver in the GT3 field, a 144.261. An impressive lap time from him. Currently 1.6 seconds up from McDade in that Porsche, all doing wonders in that Mercedes. And Charles, you mentioned it, these Mercedes stunningly quick in a straight line. I wouldn't say that they're our favorites yet, because we've got Little in that Mustang, currently the top qualifying open GT3 car, but those straight line bullets, really, they're going to be the ones we need to keep our eyes on. Those Mercedes are going to be quick.
Yeah, I absolutely think so. I think the Mercedes probably had the advantage here. The Ford's obviously big V8 front engine car, very similar to the Mustang, maybe a little bit bigger than the Mustang. I think they're a little higher profile, so maybe not quite the top end speed that you're going to get from the Merc. Same thing with the BMW. Obviously, the BMW is just massive. It's like a shoebox out there with 4 wheels, but still, again, massive front engine V8 car. Or I'm sorry, I think the BMW actually is a turbocharged V6, if I remember correctly. So yeah, the lap times will start coming in as guys get a little more familiar and get in the groove. We'll see those times come down, and generally speaking, they'll just tighten up a little bit more. And really, it's just how it's not the car is one thing. How you handle the car is something else, and that's as big a part of it as anything else.
Yeah, that's a big thing when it comes to GT3 racing, something that, in all honesty, folks, I've never really been able to grab my hands over. I'm more of an open-wheel guy, personally, so whenever I get into a GT3 car, primarily the Porsche, that's the only up-to-date GT3 car that I currently own in iRacing. It is... It's an interesting drive, just getting used to all the different characteristics that each of these cars have. Some of them quicker in a straight line, some of them better around the corners. All of them have their own twists and turns and unique bits of flair, but these drivers trying to grapple with that change a lot, and these GT3 times are coming in. O'Connor, my apologies, jumping ahead of Bell, currently 4th in that beneficiary GT3 class, set a 145.851, currently a second and a half off of Ole, who still holds the beneficiary beneficiary GT3 pole by convincing fashion as well. Still 1.1 seconds over Carney in that Porsche right behind in a P2. He is making that thing work. Here's Brandon Mateo in that 111 BM Trackside Services BMW, currently 6th in the beneficiary GT3 class, 3.7 seconds off of the pole sitter of all. And I'm curious how powerful of a slipstream effect he had there, because even in that Mercedes, which is insane in a straight line, that is still a ludicrous margin to have over anybody.
It really is. And yeah, it's he may have got a good toe. We didn't get a chance to see the entire lap. So that is going to play in as part of the challenge of qualifying, is if you see their Mateo in the BMW just kind of trailing that Porsche. Some of these cars, as you said, all these cars have different characteristics. It really depends on what car you like to drive. The more comfortable you get with the car, the faster you can make it go, as we're seeing St. Pierre and the Ferrari. Can't hardly miss that one. These cars have, like you said, different characteristics. Some cars draft better than others. So you may get this Ferrari may slip behind another car and pick up a half a second, during the course of that lap.
I gotta say, in terms of the characteristics of these race cars, and mainly this is just optical, but of course, here in a broadcast, it does kind of matter. It's nice seeing some really cool looking race cars around this racetrack. I remember when the Ferrari got introduced last season, I was on, I believe it was season 8 of the Apex Racing League GT3 trophy, which you can catch here on Apex Racing TV every single Friday. I remember when that Ferrari was introduced, and it was just drop dead gorgeous. That car is still very nice to look at on the racetrack. We'll just see if those good looks will convert to good paces as qualifying session is slowly drawing to a close. Less than a minute left to go here, Charles. And right now in both the open and beneficiary classes, I was going to say not too much of a battle, then I looked at the left-hand side of the screen with the wonderful SDK graphics that we have, and Manning was only, that's 0.0, actually, no, Manning goes to the top right as I'm saying that, at a 144.822, so Manning proving me wrong right as I was saying that it was close at the top end of open in GT3. He sneaks his way up to the top in the dying breaths of this race. Beamon now dropping down to second, currently 0.161 of a second off of Manning. 2 Porsches occupying the front row in the open GT3 class for now. Meanwhile, all in that Mercedes, he still has it pretty convincingly over Carney, now extending that gap to 1.2 seconds, with Carney not able to improve. Only 3 seconds left to go on the clock here, Charles. Looks like Ola is going to have that beneficiary GT3 pole, but in the open class, this is going to be tight.
It is going to be very tight, and Beeman, as we see here, Beeman is coming up to the end of his lap, so we'll see if he's got any improvement out here and make that even tighter, with 1600th of a second between him and Manning, P2 and P3 in the open class. As he comes to the trioval to approach the start-finish line.
Is it going to be an improvement from Beamon? Oh, yes, it is a 144.471. And right as the checkered flag was flying, Beamon is now going to inherit that open GT3 pole. But Manning isn't going down without a fight. He's still out there on the racetrack. And look at this man, Dave Bell in the 313 BMW. He's going to be coming out of the bus stop for the final time. He is now on that throttle pedal. He is going to try and be bending that floor pan, coming to the line. Currently 1.2 seconds off of all for pole in the beneficiary GT3 class. We'll see if he can improve. Only, I'm trying to do the math in my head, that's 5 thousandths of a second between Bell and McDade in the beneficiary category. Bell coming to the line. Is it going to be an improvement? Will he jump ahead of Carney and take a bite out of that gap to himself and all? He will not. So that is not going to be an improvement from Bell. He's going to remain third in class. This is Brandon Mateo, going to be one of the last cars to take the checkered flag here in this qualifying session. Currently 7th in the beneficiary category. Is he going to improve on that spot and improve on his time across the line now in that BMW? It is an improvement, however, he will not gain another spot, going to remain in 7th. And Charles, I think we're just coming to the end of this qualifying session, probably only a few more cars left to take the checkered flag. Pretty close in that open field, but in beneficiary, all just put a clinic on them.
Yeah, he did. He had a great lap and gave himself 3/10 of a second gap to everybody else in the GT3 cars.
That is a ridiculous gap, and as some more cars coming across the line, mainly Joshua O'Connor, who's now stopping, heading into turn number 1. I believe that may be one of the last cars to take the checkered flag here in this qualifying session. So it's going to be only a few moments' time before we'll be able to bring the action to you and get the festivities ready to go for this opening race of the season. Again, 45 minutes is the race length. Have a whole lot of storylines heading to this opening round of this 8-race season, and we'll be able to get the starting grid for you now for the opening race of the Operation eMotorsports Racing League here on Apex Racing TV. We've got 4 classes, 2 types of race cars, and to begin this season, it's going to be Skylar Vickery in that ZFG Racing number 28, leading them to green in the LMP2 field. The pro drivers heading a 134.593. Connor Perry's is going to be joining him on that front row. Hunter Reeve going to be starting in 3rd, the pro driver in the number 44 car, 0.3 of a second off of Vic Roy. That's going to be Gregory Meismer in 4th, Martin Wallace in 5th, and it's going to be Tyler Gutmel rounding out the LMP2 field.
Yep, absolutely. And starting on pole in the GT3 class is Colby Ohl, Tyler Beeman, Tyler Manning, 2nd and 3rd. Ian Carney in P4, Jacob Little in 5, Dave Bell in P6, Pete McDade in P7, Matt Ayotte in P8, Joshua O'Connor Sr. in P9, Tyler Shearing rounds out your top 10 in GT3.
And then looking through the rest of the field, it's going to be Anthony Calvi and the number 69 4-wide motorsports car. He's going to be starting 17th overall. John Hicks going to join him on that row. That's going to be Dan Fendick and Brandon Mateo running at the top 20 overall in this race. And looking through the rest of the field, it's going to be Jonathan Wickler in 21st, Jake Porter in 22nd, Richard Davenport in 23rd, Charles St. Pierre, the Canadian for Crazy Racing, going to be starting this race in 24th in the number 31 car. Tyler Reed going to be starting this race in 25th overall. Elliott Whitfield in 26th, and in 27th it is
Rick Hazlitt in 27th.
Rick Hazlitt, there we go. It's I was getting thrown off by his name only half appearing there. That's going to be Brandon Ellsworth starting this race in 28th. And then that will round out your field for this opening race of the season. I was refraining on just calling him Rick because I'm not sure the name laws around people's names nowadays. I know in some countries they're fairly lax, but I'm not entirely sure of people having just one name and one name alone, let alone a middle name or a last name or surname, depending on what you want to call it. But as the field is starting this pace lap, Charles, we've got pit stop to contend with and 45 minutes of racing action in front of us. If you had one word to try and describe the racing that we're about to see kick off here in just a few moments' time, what do you think that word would be?
Patience. Anytime it's a multi-class race, you have to preach patience, especially when you start getting into that lap traffic. You have to be smart about the moves you're going to make as these LMP2s work their way around. There's a 10-second gap in lap time between the 2 classes, so these LMP2s will be catching up to the GT3s, the back of the GT3 field, probably within 6 or 7 laps of the start of the race. May pass them twice before the end of it. So, your patience to get through there safely and as quickly as possible, that's the key to winning a race.
We'll definitely see that be put on full display here on Apex Racing TV tonight. We welcome you all to a brand new adventure here on Apex. The Operation eMotorsports Racing League is now underway here from Daytona. The green flag is out. The drivers are on their way, heading their way now into turn number 1. We nearly saw some 3-wide action heading through the tri-oval, but to begin this race, it is going to be the driver that started on that front row, that being Skylar Vickroy, leading them to green. Meanwhile, in the GT3 pack, you can see them grabbing the green a few moments after the LMP2s, all of them heading their way cleanly into turn number 1. However, they are side by side. They enjoyed that pace lap being side by side, and they thought, hey, I want to do that a little bit more, as they're scrapping and clawing for every single position they can now, about to head their way into the first horseshoe at the very beginning of this lap. So far, so clean, Charles. Knowing my luck, I probably just jinxed it, and I did, as I see a puff of smoke heading through the first horseshoe, and that is a multi-car incident. Tyler Manning, we're following him in the 13 car. He's one of the drivers involved in that. I believe it may have been Ian Carney Carney, the other car involved in that. Two Porsches getting involved in an incident earlier on in this race, heading into turn number 4 the first time by. But meanwhile, at the north end of the field for the pro driver in LMP2, Skylar Vickroy in that ZFG Racing number 28. He's going to be leading the LMP2 field and the overall field heading into Le Mans chicane the first time by.
Yeah, so far so good for the LMP2 class. Got a good start. We did have a couple of, as you mentioned, Carney and Manning getting together into the horseshoe. I think Rick Hazlitt is actually disconnected, so I'm not sure if he maybe got in here late, missed the start. And I think John Winker's also already had to come into the pits. Looked like he picked up some damage somewhere, and so came in and got his fast repair and is back out on the track.
Looking through the field, look at this start from Kobe Ohl. He's currently leading it in the beneficiary GT3 category by a significant margin, too. Currently about 3 seconds between himself and the Porsche of McDade running second in the class. Meanwhile, in the other GT3 class, that being the Opens, this man, Ty Schuring, is running fourth, trying to make that third here in a few moments' time. He's going to be side by side with Ayoit in that Audi. They're making contact, heading into turn number 1. These drivers are leaving no quarter out there on the racetrack, and none is expected of their competitors. Currently Little in that Ford Mustang, leading them in the Open GT3 category. Some side-by-side action now involving Richard Davenport in the 4Wide Motorsports number 17 car. He's currently running 7th in the beneficiary GT3 class in that Mercedes, which is currently being led by another Mercedes, that being a Vol, who's still extending that margin now of 3.5 seconds as a big moment coming out of the corner. That is Charles St. Pierre in the Crazy Racing number 31 car, and I'll tell you, Charles, he was crazy sideways coming out of turn 4.
Yeah, absolutely was. Just looked like he got the rear end got loose on him and just had to take it into the grass and collect it to get back out. Obviously lost some time, but you know, early in the race, so you can make the time up. Just got to be consistent. As we see a battle here coming out of the infield between the Corvette of Tyler Reed and the BMW of John Hicks.
The field already spreading out a significant margin. The LMP2 field has already begun their third lap of the race. Meanwhile, a big chunk of the LMGT3 field has yet to head their way through the bus stop chicane. Lap traffic is going to be a big factor in this race. We mentioned it earlier on, Charles, but with that split start, and I believe it was probably about 10 seconds separating the back of LMP2 to the front of GT3, that is going to make that even more of an issue for these drivers, as we may have some battling here in the not too distant future between Little and I believe that may be McDade right behind. You can see he's trying to go for a move. Heading into turn number 1, they're going to be side by side with Jacob Little on that outside in the number 74 Mustang. He is going to lose out on that spot for now. This is not a battle in class. However, it is a battle between the GT3s, and look at that. Beamon trying to get a move done on Jacob Little now. So the P2 and P3 runners in the beneficiary GT3 field dispatching of the Open GT3 leader. That actually no, my apologies. That was Beamon now taking the lead in the Open GT3 field. So well done from Beamon, getting the move in fairly convincing fashion heading into turn number 4. However, that first move was from McDade, running second in the beneficiary GT3 category. I'm curious if we could take a look at a replay to see that move from Beamon, because I was looking through, and I guess I may need to get my glasses prescription looked at or changed, because I clearly confused the small old red dash with a green dash. I may be a teeny tiny bit colorblind here on this broadcast tonight, but Beamon getting a move done in fairly convincing fashion to take the lead in the Open GT3 field, now trying to extend that gap over Jacob Little in second.
As we see the LMP2s come through with a couple of back markers, some cars exiting the pits. So there's the first instance of mixed traffic that makes things that you can see those LMP2s. Oh, he's back there just kind of splitting the middle. Oh wow, this is not the place you want to try and make those moves. That kink in between the two horseshoes, you have to get that line just right. It can be absolutely deadly if you miss it. You catch the curb in the wrong way, the next thing you know, you're over in the left-hand side wall. Or in the RV section, which I've done a couple of times. So you have to be very careful when you're making that move through there. It takes some cooperation between both the classes to make that happen. It looks like so far everybody's navigated it through successfully.
And I saw as we were taking a look at that LMP2 field cutting their way through the GT3 traffic the first time by, Gumet actually went 3 wide, I believe, in the middle, heading in to the kink on this lap. He may try and go for a risky move. Look at that from Meismer trying to deal with that Ferrari. He's going to pick up a slowdown, so that's going to cost him the lead in the Pro Beneficiary LMP2 class. He's actually going to lose out on 2 spots with another LMP2 car overtaking him. I believe that may be Wallace that just got by him. Meanwhile, in the Beneficiary GT3 class, that's a moment for Dave Bell. You can see a little bit of damage, I believe, on that 313 car. He's now heading his way into turn number 7. That was an incident, an off-track moment coming out of turn number 6. I'm not sure what in the world happened to the driver, currently running 4th in the Beneficiary GT3 category. Probably going to lose out on some spots. If he doesn't pick up the pace here in a few moments' time, there has to be some sort of damage on that race car because he is losing a whole lot of time at the moment. These drivers, the mistakes are beginning to pile up, and that's not a very good sign for some of these drivers if they're having mistakes already, even though we haven't hit the 10-minute mark in this 45-minute race.
No, absolutely not. And that was what I was talking about at the beginning of the race, is being patient. Meismer, if he would have just kind of lifted a little bit and gave the GT3 Ferrari a little more room on the exit, as opposed to trying to make that move, he could have stacked the competition up behind him, held everybody up, and then could have safely passed on the exit of that corner. But he tried to force the issue, took too much on the inside, got into the grass, and that was what forced the slowdown, so lost those 2 spots.
And I think we're going to try and look at some replays. This may be what happened to Tyler Manning at the very beginning of the race. We saw some Porsches go off the track heading into turn number 4, and here may be the moment we're following the Canadian Tyler Manning in that 13 car, and he got a big hip check. That actually wasn't a hip check. That was a bumper check heading into turn number 4. Got the old boot scoon boogie going horribly wrong heading into turn 4 for the first time by. That was at the very beginning of the race, and that is really messed up his day. Meanwhile, Dave Bell's had his day messed up. He's now come down pit lane, having to repair some sort of damage. He lost a whole lot of time after that off-track excursion a few moments ago, but never mind. Let's switch our attention back to this fight in LMP2. There's nearly a collision involving the 2 Pro Beneficiary drivers in LMP2. Gumet was very close to getting a bumper check from Meismer heading into turn number 1. That was incredibly close to contact, Charles.
Yeah, absolutely it was. It's just a very, that's probably the most difficult section of track, is that section between 2 and 3, and just, catch the curb wrong, spin the tires, kind of hold you up. The cars behind don't really anticipate it very well. So you have to just be very careful there as we see them now coming back out onto the NASCAR oval section, the backstretch, as they're working their way down into the Le Mans chicane, and you still have Meismer trailing Gumet. I'm wondering about the car we just saw come in just a few minutes ago. I think it was Hicks, or was it? No, it was Bell. They came in.
Yes, correct. It was Bell.
Yeah, it came in a lap 6. I'm wondering if that's enough to where he could finish the race. And it's kind of one of those things that, see Victory there, Vicroy, sorry, with the slowdown. That's the dreaded slowdown coming out of the Le Mans chicane. Have to be very careful there.
Oh, the whole field in Pro LMP2 has been shuffled around. I think that was a spinner spinning off the track heading through turn number 1. But getting back to the point I was just about to mention, the whole complexion of the Pro LMP2 races really just changed. Vicroy was leading. That gap wasn't big at all. It was about 0.3 of a second heading into the Le Mans chicane last time by, then pushing it a little bit too hard, trying to extend that uncomfortable gap he had. He lost it heading through the Le Mans chicane, picked up a slowdown, and he's now 3.7 seconds off of Hunter Reeve, who's now grabbed the top spot in Pro LMP2. Currently, Perry's trying to maybe size up a move in the not-too-distant future. He lost the lead, very briefly picked it up after the slowdown for Vicroy. However, he lost it heading into turn number 1, as now Reeve holding on to that spot. These 2 cars separated by about 0.2 of a second, heading their way back onto the high banks. But right now, Connor Perry's is going to have a fantastic run back to head into Le Mans, but he definitely backed out of it there. I think he's seeing that GT GT3 car a little bit farther up the road, and he does not have a good feeling about this at all. He don't want to go for the move yet. He's waiting for all of these drivers to get slowed down. He is going to be gunning it coming out of this corner, and I think heading to that start-finish line to begin lap 8 in just a few moments' time is going to be the opportunity that Connor Perry's is going to use to take the lead of this race in that number 11 car. That gap is closing. Vic Roy also closing that gap up significantly as well. Is he going to go for the move heading into the tri-oval? Is he going to tuck in that slipstream? He's not really going for the move, it must be said, Charles. And will he go for the move in the braking zone? No, he actually backs out of it, and I think I know what's going on here, Charles. You mentioned just one lap ago the fuel issue. I think that's fuel saving going on.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that's exactly what's happening. Yeah, it was smart to kind of back off going in. You want your run coming out of the bus stop to the start-finish line to make that pass going before you get there at the end of the race, but also going into turn 1 to kind of set that, and that gives you basically the entire lap to try and extend the gap. Obviously, these cars draft, the LMP2s draft really well, so if you're within 0.8 of a second or so, you're going to be able to close that gap to the car in front. But yeah, I think that was definitely just a fuel saving thing. He's just kind of waiting, biding his time, said, you know what, we're still 33 minutes away from the end of this race. There's no sense in fighting now. Let's see if we can work together, save a little bit of fuel, maybe extend that gap back to Vic Roy, because obviously you got a fast race car back there. So the longer we can stay, that 3-second gap, the better off we're going to be toward the end of the race.
And it looks like we're going to have a fight here in the open GT3 field. Little and Beamon going to be side by side, a Porsche and a Mustang. They've also got a GT3 car of McDade a little bit farther up the road, acting as a pick in this fight, but Beamon is going to hold off that challenge. I'm curious if Little lifted heading into turn number 1 to just be like, hey, at this point in time, we're only 12 coming up to 13 minutes into this 45-minute race, Charles. I'm sure some of the drivers have seen a little bit of the chaos going on all throughout the field, and they have just decided at this point to take it a little bit easy. They definitely haven't realized that the LMP2 Pro Ben class is now side by side. Is Tyler Goodmel getting the move done to take the lead in that class over Meismer? Those two covered by barely any air right now. Going to extend that gap a little bit, but still less than a second separating those two cars. And they also have a whole gaggle of GT3 cars, both open and beneficiary, to try and deal with in the not too distant future. Getting held up a whole lot through the kink is Tyler Goodmel, that Atomic Racing number 5. He just lost out on a whole lot of time, but I don't think Meismer went through that traffic any better, because that gap is actually extended to about 6.5 of a second heading into turn number 7 right now. But these drivers really wary to try and deal with the lap traffic not only as quickly as they can, but as cleanly as they can. Trust me, I've seen a whole lot of multi-class racing, both as a race steward and a commentator, in which a driver's chances have been entirely demolished by an unwise move dealing with some multi-class traffic. But Goodmel is going to try and withstand any sort of challenge from Meismer behind. A little bit of wall contact, I think, with a Corvette a little bit farther in the back. A shot that may have been Whitfield running 4th in the beneficiary GT3 class. I'm not exactly sure what that was. It was a Corvette. I think I saw some debris flying coming out of NASCAR 1 and 2. Anthony Calvi now slow coming out of the Le Mans chicane, possibly serving a slowdown. Usually if you see a driver running towards a barrier, they are serving a slowdown and now back up to speed, and maybe trying to size up a move here in a few moments time. This, I think, is side by side with Manning. Yes, it is. So this is a battle for 6th in the open GT3 field. They're going to be side by side heading into the tri-oval with the Corvette. I believe that is, yes, it is Reed running 5th in the open GT3 field. That's the Corvette right there that we see involved in this fight as well. But looking up and down the field, the Pro LMP2 field is closed up yet again. Vic Roy has closed up that gap. It was about teetering around 4 seconds, usually around that 3.5 to 4 second barrier after that slowdown he had to serve coming out of the Le Mans chicane. He's now closed up that gap to 0.7 of a second off of Hunter Reeve, leading in that Pro LMP2 field. We may see a 3-way dogfight in the LMP2s, and I don't know about you, Charles, I'm really looking forward to that. That's going to be some fun, especially if lap traffic's involved.
Yeah, absolutely. I was looking at that. I think Calvi earlier, I think he got kind of crossed up as those 3 LMPs of Guillemette, Meismer, and Wallace, who's a lap down, all came in right there at the entry to the bus stop and it kind of crossed him a little bit, and I think he just kind of missed his entry point, and of course just carried over through the chicane to the exit. So yeah, slow down, lost a couple positions. Yeah, that gap up front's really tightened up. Vic Roy's made up that gap, and so now he's well within draft range of the two cars in front. And so we'll see if he decides he wants to get back out and lead for a little bit longer.
Yeah, Perry's not really forcing the issue, it must be said, and Vic Roy, I think he just picked up yet another slowdown as that gap has now increased up to 3.8 seconds, teetering around 4 now. Yes, it is. So another incident involving Vic Roy. He is losing time yet again. Not ideal for the driver that started this race from the pole and led for the opening portion of it. We're now 11 laps in to this 45-minute race here on Apex Racing TV. We've already seen a decent amount of drama, some pit stops already. The LMP2 field has been through GT3, I believe, about 3 times thus far. So these drivers already starting to deal with that traffic issue. We've got battles up and down the field. That fight in Pro Beneficiary still underway between Gutmel and Meismer. 0.3 of a second separating the two in that second LMP2 field. They're currently running, I believe, 3rd and 4th overall as well in LMP2. So these drivers putting on a very good show, despite the fact that they have been battling from start to finish.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the only car that's still on the lead lap for the GT3s, I think, as the leaders will be coming up to him very, very soon, is Ull in that Mercedes. Is just basically driven off and kind of left the rest of the field. Just, having himself quite a good race. So I think the leaders will be coming up to him in short order and putting him a lap down with the rest of the GT3 field. But obviously that's not really important to those guys. Just getting those passes done safely is the important thing, and maintaining that 13-second gap back to P2 to Beeman.
That was an interesting call from Meismer, briefly running down on the apron. I'm not sure if that's entirely legal, but that may not entirely be illegal. That's Jacob Little trying to get a move done on McDade, who's running second in the Beneficiary GT3 class. He's going to get a move put on him by the driver running P2 in the open GT3 field. Willie comes back on him heading into turn number 1, and he gets that move done to remain in that spot overall. Well done from McDade. He may be 13.5 seconds off of Ull in the lead in Beneficiary GT3. However, he's still putting on a very good show and has an extensive gap between himself and O'Connor, running 3rd in the Ben GT3 class. Little also putting on a good show, losing a little bit of time, it must be said, to Beeman in 1st in the Open GT3 class. These drivers putting on some very good shows currently. I feel like my most impressive driver thus far has to be Ull, 13.6 second gap, which is by quite a wide margin the biggest gap for the lead in any of the 4 classes. And really, Charles, it isn't even close.
It's not close, and it just shows he's a pro beneficiary, so much higher experience level than maybe some of the other guys. And so yeah, he's proven it out on the track. As we're looking here at Dan Fendick, running in the open category. He's currently P12th in the GT3's over total. As we switch back now to the LMP2 field, Guimet still running in P5 in the LMP2s. As we see now, Wallace has now taken that 4th position. I thought he was a lap down, but apparently I was mistaken. Maybe I just read the SDK timing and scoring wrong. So Wallace in 4th, Guimet in 5th, and Meismer in 6th. I feel like Meismer may be just, looks like these guys are just kind of riding it out till they get to the pit window. They'll come in and take their stops and see if they can make a gap to the other cars in that group.
I think that pit window is definitely open. The window is also open for Meismer to maybe get a move done on Gutmel. He ran pretty wide coming through turn number 6. The second of the 2 horseshoes are in this track. Not close enough to get a move done yet, but Meismer is still within striking distance. About 1.5 separating those two. Now coming back on to the NASCAR banking. It is going to be close between these 2 cars. Is Meismer going to back out of it, or is he going to go for the move? You got some traffic a little bit farther up the road for them to contend with in the not too distant future. danger, but Meismer got that inside line heading into the Le Mans chicane, but he will understandably back out of it. That section is hard enough single file, let alone side by side, but I think Gutmel may have just picked up a slowdown penalty because it looked like he was very wide heading through the Le Mans chicane. He's not losing time, so I think he may have been avoiding a mild crisis at that point. As we look at the GT3 contenders, they're not coming down pit lane, and really, Charles, this pit window is definitely open. We're only a minute and a half away from the halfway mark in this 45-minute long race. Man, time flies when you're having fun, and these cars already considering a run down pit lane. Is it the right call just to come in at the halfway mark, or you think these drivers are going to try and go for some off-the-wall strategy calls? What do you think?
I think it's as much to do with the traffic as it is about the time. So if you're in an LMP2 and you're coming up on a big gaggle of GT cars that are battling hard, maybe that's when you come in. You take your pit stop, let them get their gap again, and you start chasing. Maybe those guys peel off and pit, so you don't have to battle them on the track. You can just do the overlap, as we see Anthony Calvi coming in for his pit stop in that Mercedes. So yeah, I think it's as much about the traffic on the track as it is about how much fuel or what time is left in the race.
And that's definitely going to be a big role, and we've seen that a lot when it comes to multi-class racing and even single-class racing for that matter. The traffic situation playing a big role in when these drivers decide to come down pit lane. Coming up to the halfway mark in just a couple of seconds time. The first half of this race, quite interesting, with some drivers extending some pretty wide margins. The LMP2 top three pretty much being flipped on its head, and that fight in the Pro Beneficiary LMP2 class being incredibly intense from start to finish thus far. Beneficiary and GT3, on the other hand, it's now 15.5-second gap between Ola McDade and P1 and P2. Open and GT3, meanwhile, starting to extend a little bit, with Beeman extending to about 4 seconds over Little, first and second in that open GT3 class. But I think our attention is on this LMP2 fight. Looking a bit tense, not really between Paris and Reeve, but between Reeve and Vic Roy. About 0.7 of a second separating these two drivers heading through the infield section on this 15th lap of the race, and they may be eyeing pit stops here soon, Charles. I'm curious which one of them is going to be the first one to come in, as Peter McDade, running second in the Beneficiary GT3 class, comes in for a stop.
Yep, coming in, taking his stop now. Still a pretty tight battle, as you mentioned earlier, with Beeman, kind of extending his gap out, but then you've got Little, Schuring, Ayat, and Manning. We're all still pretty close together on track. We see Manning coming in now to take his pit stop as well. So that was still a pretty tight battle on the track overall, as we look here at Tyler Reed in the Corvette. So yeah, it's just, I think now everybody's saying, okay, let's go ahead and maybe my car is a little out of balance, and maybe now's the right time that I want to take my fuel, maybe settle the car down a little bit more, as we see Fendick on the high side. I believe that's Jake Porter also as well. That's on down. That was just behind him. There he is in the Audi. And now back to the battle with Meismer and Guimet side by side, coming through the start-finish line, headed down into turn one, and nice. Guimet just backs off, says, all right, we'll let you have that. Ooh, and crossed him over. Great move by Guimet. Crossed him over. Meismer went a little deep into turn one, and Guimet did a good job of just cutting down under after backing out early and taking that spot back.
Yeah, well done from Gomet to take the lead in the Pro Beneficiary category. These two have been swapping the lead quite often in this race, and I'm sure in the second half it will definitely continue. Look at Gomet going for the move on the Lap GT3 Corvette heading into turn number 6. These drivers starting to be a little bit more risky when it comes to dealing with the traffic. And here's the second place runner in the open GT3 field. That's Tyler Beeman heading now down through pit lane. Another open GT3 driver in the pits currently, along with Schuring, who was running third, down to Oyoit running in third in the class. They're all, of course, down pit lane. Little's yet to come down the pits yet, keyword being yet. He will have to at some point in time. This is going to give P2 in the Open GT3 category, at least for a few moments, to Tyler Reed in that Corvette. You can actually see him buzzing by pit lane, now going to overtake all in the beneficiary GT3 class. He's now come down pit lane and going to maintain that 15.5-second margin between himself and McDade in the Porsche running P2 in Ben GT3. This has been an incredibly dominating drive from the Eternal Racing car of Colby Reed. Not Colby Reed. Tyler Reed overtook him. It's Kobe All in that Mercedes. He's just put on a fantastic show right now. That gap, it is coming down a teeny tiny bit, albeit he's on cold tires, so not too much to read in that respect. But man, All, I wouldn't call him the most impressive driver so far, because I think we've had some pretty impressive drives thus far in this race. But All, he has just been a force to be reckoned with all throughout this race, and I think unless some sort of major disaster happens, he's probably going to have a nice cruise between now and the checkered flag.
Yeah, I think so. But obviously now that we've still got some cars out that are on low fuel, they're in front. If he, as we see Little now making his way down the pit lane, we'll see if Reed comes in as well on this lap. I think Reed and Fendick are the last two GT3s that have yet to pit. So we'll see if they come in the next lap or two. They may just be out of fuel, but it's going to be very, Old's going to have to be very cautious as we see Reed now coming in with the fact that he's got maybe a little bit faster car, a little bit fresher with warm tires up front, but looks like that was well timed. He just came in a lap early. I think everybody else would be on their last lap of fuel. So looks like will safely go back into the lead. It has about a 13-second gap over Bieber.
Yeah, these drivers starting to extend their margins up and down the field. The race settling into a groove. Here's Martin Wallace in the 666 ZFG Racing LMP2. He's come down pit lane along with Meismer coming down away from his sparring partner of Gumelt. So those two coming down pit lane at different times, it must be said. We'll see how that changes the fight in the Pro Beneficiary LMP2 field. Some more drivers exiting out. That's Tyler Reed, who very briefly took the lead in Open GT3. He's now lost it, currently running down in 7th behind Calvi in the Mercedes. Is actually, I believe, managed to jump ahead of Reed throughout this pit cycle, so nicely played from the driver of that Mercedes to move up a spot in class. Looking up and down the field currently, Pro LMP2 is the closest fight that we have on our hands right now, as Open GT3 currently separated by about 6.5 seconds between Beeman and Schuring, running first and second in that Porsche and BMW respectively, as that's a Mercedes spun. Very comedic camera angle, must be said, Mr. Lee Thompson and the production hauler. That was very funny just seeing the stopped car of Jonathan Winkler. He's gone for a spin hang through turn number 6, trying to get that car back up and rolling. The 127 out and around, not going to do his tires any favors and not doing his chances any favors. Currently running 11th in that Open GT3 field, as our at 1 point leader Skylar Vickery has now come down pit lane in the Pro LMP2 field.
Yep. Vicroy's in. Gumet still out on the track, and I was going to say that it's kind of interesting. Wallace and Meismer came in together. They're not necessarily that close together. They're 3 seconds apart. But you know, if you're out there in a draft race, sometimes it's nice to have a drafting partner when you come into the pits. Those guys came in together. Gumet stayed out, so he'll be out there kind of on an island by himself. You know, what I would say in the bubble, because he's got about an 8-second gap in front to Reeve, and he's going to have a significant gap behind to both Vicroy, Wallace, and Meismer, as Vicroy is now making his way out of the pits. So he'll be by himself for a lap or so until he can come in, and we'll see if those two guys came out or that came in together can make any headway.
Yeah, these drivers definitely going to try and extend any sort of gap or try and cut away at any sort of gap that they want to in the last 15 minutes of this race. Some more drivers coming down pit lane. That's Ian Carney in the 54 4-wide motorsports car, running 5th in the beneficiary GT3 class. These drivers starting to spread out a little bit, but now it's a matter of when, not if, that the Pro LMP2 field, the P1 and P2 runner, as Carney overshoots his box heading down pit lane. I'm curious when Paris and Reeve are going to come down pit lane, and will they come together? They will not, as Reeve has now come down pit lane, about 30.5 minutes on the clock of this 45-minute long race. So Hunter Reeve in the TFG Racing number 44 coming down pit lane, running second now in the Pro LMP2 field. He very briefly took the lead, however he lost it to Paris. At this point in time, though, will he be able to do the undercut? That is a real question, Charles. Is this going to be the strategy call to win the race with, or is it not going to age well? In the beneficiary GT3 field, this man, Peter McDade, tried to go for the undercut, but it didn't really work out too well for him, as now that gap between himself and Colby Ull is now extended to nearly 18 seconds. So I'm wondering if the opposite is going to be true in the LMP2 field, and Reeve may be able to eat away at that gap between himself and Paris.
That's what we're going to find out here very soon. His stop time was about a second and a half longer from cone to cone than Vickroy. So obviously that's not good. They look like they took the same amount of fuel there or thereabouts. So he lost a little bit of time on pit road, trying to get the car settled down, and that seems to be, the more we do these racing leagues that have pit stops involved, that seems to be the reason for a win or a loss more often than not, is just getting the pit stop right, getting your pit entry and your pit exit right, and saving as much time there as you can, as Paris is now coming into the pits for his stop.
There we go, the driver who we were waiting to come down pit lane. Paris is now down on in the pits, and you can also see Tyler Goodmel coming down pit lane to try and cover off the move from Meismer when he came down pit lane, I think about 2 or 3 laps ago, so it has been a little bit of time between the two drivers in the Pro Beneficiary LMP2 field coming down pit lane for their one and only stop in this race. There's Goodmel stopping in his box, hitting his marks. We'll see if the Atomic Racing number 5 car is going to exit out with the Pro Beneficiary lead. It should be noted that Vickroy, he managed to get in front of Reeve with that pit cycle, and I think he may have a very good shot of getting out in front of Paris. Paris is going to lose the lead of the race. Vickroy just got by him, so Vickroy coming in for that much earlier stop compared to everybody else. He is going to lose the lead in the Pro LMP2 field. He's actually going to barely hang on to the podium spot. It's going to be close between himself and Wallace actually running fourth as it stands at the moment. It'll be about 2.5 seconds between them. You can see him a little bit farther in the back. A shot Wallace running fourth in the Pro LMP2 field, but Vickroy, a driver who we thought had a really good shot to win this race, started from the pole, led the first few laps, then things really didn't go well for him. He picked up one slowdown, then caught back up, then he picked up another slowdown, fell back, tried to go for a different strategy, came in much earlier than the likes of Reeve and Paris, but it's worked out beautifully for him, as he now has a 3.5 second gap over Reeve, let alone Paris, who's 5 seconds behind him.
Yeah, for sure. And the thing is excuse me, you have to be very careful now from the rest of the race, because you won't have as much time to make up a mistake. So those slowdowns in the bus stop are going to be crucial in avoiding those. But Paris actually was in his box about 7 seconds longer than the front two. And that seems to be what's caused him the biggest issue here. And not sure if it was just maybe, and that was on stoppage time, so he took more fuel, and maybe he took tires. I don't know, not really sure. So maybe that's the difference in those times. But it's interesting. That seems to be the reason he's now stuck in P3 with Guillemette right behind him.
And thankfully for him, or unthankfully, fortunately or unfortunately, there's the correct use of that phrase, he still has about 10 minutes left to go in this race. So Paris, he's not out of it. It's actually closed up that gap a teeny tiny bit, as there's a wreck in the LMGT3 field in the open class. That's Tyler Manning, who earlier on in this race got involved in an incident heading into the horseshoe of turn number 4 on lap 1 to be a bit more precise. And now you can see some heavy damage to that car. You can also see, I believe that is That's the Ferrari of, I believe, Charles St. Pierre stopped in his box. Yes, it is Charles St. Pierre. The crazy racing number 31 had a crazy slide coming out of turn 4, and now he has some crazy damage on that Ferrari. That thing is ready for the scrap heap, and I'm curious if we could find a replay to see what in the world happened there. Trying to figure out exactly where that may have happened. It had to have been coming out of the Le Mans chicane, because in my time covering and looking at open wheel action, and not open wheel action, multi-class action here at Daytona, I don't think I've ever seen a crash heading through, and oh boy, what in the world happened there, Charles?
Oh, I'm not sure. Tyler Manning was just an innocent bystander. Oh, he came up, I think maybe he was working a slowdown, and came up, slapped the wall, and then, you know, that wouldn't have been that bad, but then came down on the track, nowhere for Manning to go, and that removed most of the Ferrari's bodywork. So just a tough break there for Manning. Once again, not sure what happened with St. Pierre there. Just like I said, it just kind of looked like he maybe just got a little too high, maybe you know, touched the wall, and just sent his car spinning back across the track.
I think we may have to take a look at some more angles of that, because that is a very strange looking collision. Hopefully we could take a look at that after this Reeve and Parise fight cools down, because these two covered by less than 1/10 of a second heading into turn number 6. These two, they can't run each other too hard, because Vicroy will just start to pull away. Actually, Rise, I say that gap between themselves and Vicroy has decreased a tiny bit as they're side-by-side heading through turn number 7, with Parise and Reeve battling like it's a final lap of the race. They can't lose too much time, though, otherwise their chances of winning the opening round of this Operation eMotorsport season here at Daytona International Speedway will go down the drain. Parise now holding on to that P2 spot. Reeve in third in that gap between themselves and Vicroy, now down to about 2.5 seconds. You can see a big lift from Hunter Reeve in that TFG Racing number 44 heading into the Le Mans chicane. These two drivers are not worried about fuel at this point. They've already gotten their pit stop done, dusted, taken care of, out of sight and out of mind. Right now, these drivers may be trying to size up any sort of way that they can close that gap between themselves and Vicroy. It's not game, set, match, though, Charles. That gap's still decreasing, with Vicroy having to deal. He's actually not even dealing with some more lap traffic. That gap is just going down, with these two drafting and probably having a pretty big pace advantage, with Vicroy running in completely clean air. Heading through the corners, clean air is a blessing. Heading down the straightaways here at Daytona International Speedway, it is a curse. So Vicroy, that gap is decreasing between himself, Parise, and Reeve right behind. I think the next time they go through GT3 traffic, we may see a three-way fight in our hands coming to the checkered flag.
I think you're right. Yeah, the lap prior to this, Parise was a full second faster than Vicroy and Reeve. So I'm wondering, I don't think that is because he got a tow off of a GT car. I just think that, yeah, I still want to go back and say, you know, with that extra time in the pits, did he take more fuel? Maybe the two guys, Vicroy and Reeve, are just, maybe they short fuel to and are just trying to nurse the fuel home. And Parise took enough that he could just go full out for the remainder of the race, or maybe he took 2 tires, and maybe that's that much of a difference on lap time. I don't know. It's interesting. The interesting question. Then we'll have to ask somebody after this race.
Oh, that is going to be a big question for sure. I think that's a very good theory you proposed there, Charles, because we've seen it happen before in races with pit stops. We have plenty of experience with pit stops deciding and completely altering a race, and maybe this is just another case of it. Parise now closing that gap to 1.4 seconds between himself and Vicroy, leading this field, and this is the first time he's led for an extended period of time since the very beginning of the race. Started this race from the pole in the number 28 ZFG racing car, then he lost it, and ever since then, he's been on the back foot, but he's gone it back into the lead. However, that's going to do him no favors. Tried to get the move done on the BMW GT3 car heading into turn number 4, overshot a teeny tiny bit, maybe a little bit of rear locking parking heading into turn number 4, it must be said. But regardless of how he got sideways and he lost even more time to Paris, who's going to deal with that GT3 car a lot more effectively than Skylar Vickroy did it. The ZFG Racing number 28 driver, he is going to have a lot on his hands. I don't think Riva is going to be a factor in this fight, as he's now fallen back 3.8 seconds away from Vickroy, my apologies, and that gap between himself and Paris is pretty big as well. So this is looking like it's going to be a 2-horse race with less than 5 minutes on the clock, coming in at 4.5 minutes right now, Charles. So with a few laps left and a few overtaking opportunities left as well, that gap is continuing to diminish between Vickroy and Paris. He may lose a little bit of time, though, not getting the luck of the green with the lap traffic, heading through the Le Mans chicane, nearly avoiding a collision and losing a decent amount of time, it must be said. But this is looking like it's going to be a grandstand finish here between Vickroy and Paris for the win in the Pro LMP2 class.
Yeah, we're gonna have to watch. It's that, you know, traffic's getting involved, and it's making those gaps kind of bounce, you know, tighter and then further back, just depending on where you're catching the slower traffic. So we'll see if Paris, if he gets a good clean lap this time. Looks like there's a little bit of traffic in front of both cars, so they'll both have to deal with them. But if he gets a really clean lap to get some right and can close that down, if he gets within a second, it's going to be let me see how I can set up the pass for the win on the last lap. So that's what we'll start looking for as we get just a little bit closer here, with just a couple of maybe 2 laps left to go when we get to the start finish line.
I'll tell you what, I think a photo finish for the overall victory in this race would be a perfect way to cap off this opening round of the championship, broadcasted here on Apex Racing TV. For all the viewers tuning in to both the Apex Racing TV stream and the simulcast on the Operation Motorsports YouTube channel, we welcome you all aboard, and we're hoping that you enjoy this awesome racing action, this awesome finish that we're setting ourselves up for now with 3 minutes left to go on the clock. It's Vickroy and Paris currently running P1 and P2 in the Pro LMP2 field. Looking through the rest of the field, though, Gutmel has actually extended that gap a decent amount in that Pro Beneficiary LMP2 class. The gap between himself and Meismer is pretty expansive, 19 and coming up to 20 seconds between those two cars. It was a hard-fought fight during the first half, but once those pit stops came, things really fell apart for Meismer. It looks like he's going to have to settle for second in this race. Meanwhile, in the Beneficiary GT3 field, Kobe Ull has been the standout star. He has driven that Mercedes to the absolute limit, and it's working out for him. That 3 car, the Eternal Racing number 3 car, the Mercedes, has just been the force to be reckoned with from start to finish. He's lapped everyone in class all the way up to 3rd, with O'Connor in that Mustang being the last on the lead lap. McDade running in 2nd is 26.8 seconds behind. Looks like it is going to be all bringing home that Mercedes first in the Beneficiary GT3 class to begin this season. And Vickroy actually extending that gap between himself and Paris, it must be said. I don't think he was very happy over iRacing radio. I think I heard him barking commands at some of the GT3 cars because that gap was about 2 seconds. It's now gone below 1.5 seconds. So Vickroy's starting to feel even more pressure. I believe, if I'm very much mistaken, I know my math skills aren't very good, we may be coming to the white flag this time by, if not the 2 to go, but there's not a whole lot of time left to go in this race, Charles. And as it looks like all the other classes throughout this field between Pro Beneficiary and LMP2, Beneficiary and GT3, and Open and GT3, as it looks like those are set in stone, the Pro LMP2 field is setting ourselves up for a grandstand finish.
Yeah, absolutely. Paris just keeps closing that gap down. It seems like as long as they're in clean air, he's just quicker than Vickroy at this point of the race. So we'll see as we get the white flag as we come by. I believe we will. We're within a minute, and I see the white flag from Barney being displayed. So this will be our last lap of the race.
Alrighty, here we go. This is going to be a fantastic finish We'll just have to wait and see if it is going to be a photo finish that we may have hinted around a few moments ago. I certainly wouldn't rule it out with all the twists and turns we've had to deal with thus far. The 12 corners on this racetrack haven't been the only twists and turns. These drivers have had to deal with strategy content, dealing with lap traffic on multiple occasions from start to finish. The past 45 minutes have been intense. It looks like the final few moments are going to be even more intense. Paris trying to close that gap between himself and Vic Roy didn't get a good exit coming out of turn number 6. It must be said, and look at the GT3 traffic. That was a Ferrari. I believe that may have been Charles St. Pierre heading into turn number 7. So that was a little bit of a checkup for these drivers. That damaged Ferrari rejoining the race after an incident earlier. That was not what Vic Roy wanted to see, but that gap is still a little over a half a second. Now about 0.6 of a second separating these two cars. It all matters on the Le Mans chicane for the final time. Is Vic Roy going to try and manage it as cleanly as he can and get a good exit? Is he going to pick up a slowdown, which cost him the lead earlier on in the race? It looks like he gets through there cleanly. He's now running on the upper line. Paris picked up a slowdown, though. That's going to take him out of it. Paris was so close, but that dirty air just created a bit too much turbulence. It's going to cost him any chance at taking the win in the opening race of this season. And in the end, the driver that started this race on the pole, Skylar Vic Roy, in the CFG Racing number 28, is going to win it here at Daytona International Speedway to kick this season off. A little bit farther behind, the Atomic Racing number 5, Tyler Goodmel, is going to be finishing this race first in the Pro Beneficiary category. But Paris, right as I was saying that Vic Roy had lost the lead earlier with a slowdown heading through the bus stop chicane, or the Le Mans chicane, or whatever it's called nowadays, the foot was put on the other shoe, and Paris ended up losing a shot at winning this race. He had to go for it, though. That gap wasn't really going to help him grab the win. He just needed to send it for that final time, and sadly, it was too little too late, and that slowdown really just put him 6 feet under. All ends up winning it in the Beneficiary GT3 field. Meanwhile, Tyler Beeman, the Mad Sim Racing car number 91, is going to round his way into the trial in just a few moments time, and the Porsche is going to end up taking the win in the open GT3 field to kick this season off. Charles, it's unfortunate that Paris got that slowdown. Ooh, as one in the world is happening here with Tyler Schuring. Maybe trying to imitate what Dale Earnhardt did after winning the Daytona 500 back in 1998, except without the donuts. Not sure exactly what happened there, Charles, but
I'm not sure either.
It's a bit unfortunate that Paris picked up that slowdown hang through the Le Mans chicane, but I really think unless he had a tremendous exit and Vic Roy completely screwed up, it was probably Vic Roy's to lose. I think that gap was just a bit too much to chew coming to the checkered flag.
You know, I was in there as you were calling the battle. I was watching the timing and scoring. He was in the prime position going in. He would close that gap down to about 4/10 going into the bus stop, carrying just tons of speed. Had he held it, it might have been a photo finish. It was just one of those things that he just carried a little too much, could not handle the car, got the slowdown, and that's that's the difference in the race, unfortunately. Otherwise, it was a great run by Paris to try and get it as close as he did. But a good starting race from everybody. It was lots of battles all over the track. It's good to see these guys get the victory, and we'll do the race results now.
And we will go through the race results after a dramatic and intensely exciting night of racing action here on Apex Racing TV from the opening round of the Operation eMotorsports iRacing League. And in the end, it was Skylar Victory taking the victory. Skylar Vic Roy, my apologies. His name isn't Skylar Victory. However, he did take the victory, currently 2.3 seconds in front of Connor Paris, taking the first checkered flag of the season. Hunter Reeve going to round out your podium in third. He briefly led in this race, however, after those pit stops, probably having to save a little bit of fuel towards the end of it. Things didn't work out too well for him. Then in the Pro Beneficiary LMP2 field, it was Tyler Goodmel ending up winning it. Probably been, yeah, I mean, overall, though, very solid from the driver of the number 5 car. He's put on a pretty good show and only 6.5 seconds off of the overall win. So very well played from the driver of the number 5 car. That is Martin Wallace running at the Pro LMP2 field, 5th overall and 5th in the LMP2s. That's going to be Gregory Meismer rounding out the LMP2 field. Kobe Ohl ends up taking a dominant victory in the GT3 beneficiary category. He finished right in front of the Open GT3 winner of Tyler Beeman. Peter McDade going to end up in 9th with Tyler Schuring rounding out the overall top 10.
Yep, starting in 11th, we've got Jacob Little in the Open category, P5 overall. Matt Ayotte in P6 and 12th overall. Tyler Reed, Anthony Calvi, Tyler Manning, Dan Fendick, Dave Bell, Elliott Whitfield, Jake Porter, and Ian Carney rounding out your top 20. Then we have John Hicks, John Winker, Brandon Mateo in 23rd, Josh O'Connor in 24th, Richard Davenport in 25th, Charles St. Pierre in 26th, Rick Haslett in 27th, who actually did get back out on the track, and Brandon Allsworth did not, however, and finishes 28th overall.
So those are the results from the opening round of the Operation eMotorsports iRacing League here on Apex Racing TV. It has been a very hard-fought evening of racing action, and I think we can definitely say that here in the commentary booth, seeing the racing action that we just saw over the past 45 minutes, but I think these drivers can definitely give a good perspective as well. We've got some drivers waiting in the interview waiting area. Charles, who would you like to have a chat with?
Let's talk with Tyler Gilmet, please. We'll bring him in. Tyler, P4 overall, I believe P1 in the pro beneficiary class. Is that correct? Congratulations. So did see you battling quite a bit with Wallace and Meismer in the first half of the race. And then once the pit stops happened, you just kind of got shuffled up toward the front, and it was a battle between you and then I think Paris as well.
Yeah, Charles, that's right. P1 in class and got up to P4 overall. And it was a really tight battle between me and Wallace and Meismer there. It was a lot of fun. And then I just saved fuel throughout the race, took no extra fuel in the stop, and made up a lot of time on the guys up front. But they just had the pace over me that I couldn't keep up.
Yeah, absolutely. We did see a lot of the fuel saving strategy going on, which is it's all part and parcel of running at Daytona. When you have these 45-minute races, you try and extend that fuel for as long as you can. So how are you feeling about the season? Looks like a pretty good schedule. All of our, most of our North American tracks with a little wrinkle of Spa thrown in for a good measure. So how are you feeling about running these LMP2s for the season?
Really excited for this season. This is something we've been kind of working towards the last couple of seasons with Opmo. And it's turning out really good. Got a lot of entries this year, so there's a lot of interest, which is awesome to see. We love a full track.
Yeah, absolutely. Tyler, congratulations on the class win, and we'll see you next week at Sebring.
All right. Thank you, Charles.
Thank you.
And that was Tyler Gilmet, who I've been pronouncing as Giltmel throughout the entirety of this race. I may have to issue out a formal apology after we wrap this broadcast here on Apex Racing TV. Got some more drivers waiting in the interview waiting area. I am trying to figure out who we should have a chat with next. I think we'll talk to Peter McDade because there's someone waiting in the interview waiting area. We're not entirely sure who they are, so we'll bring in Peter McDade because we know he ended up P2 when everything was said and done in his class. Now, Peter, thank you for joining us here in the commentary booth on Apex Racing TV. Pretty hard-fought evening from your perspective here at Daytona. Talk us through it.
Oh yeah, it was definitely a hard-fought evening. I came into the race with very little practice. I had just figured out that the race was today, got on about an hour previous, worked on a setup with a friend of mine, and just started practicing about an hour previous. Kept going, took it like I would take any endurance race. I didn't have a mindset of 45 minutes, I had a mindset of 3 hours and just drive to survive. Avoided a lot of accidents, kept racing. Towards the end, I had a little bit of a fault, totally my problem for not realizing I was going that far to the right. I accidentally put Ty in the wall. However, we ended up finishing clean in the end, Everything was great, and overall it was a great race from all the competitors out there today, Ron.
Well, it was definitely exciting from our perspective here in the commentary booth, and you mentioned a good point there, talking about trying to cook up a setup here with this Porsche. Now, considering I drive the Porsche in iRacing as well, I know that car is pretty setup dependent, and around this track with a whole lot of challenging bends, I can imagine having a setup is really, really important to try and unlock your true pace around this racetrack. And will Sebring in 1 week's time be, actually, I believe it may not be Sebring. Let me pull up the schedule here in a few moments' time. Of course, here at Daytona, it was very important to have a good setup. Road America is going to be the next race of the season. Would you say that is more or less setup dependent in the Porsche, considering it's a bit more straight line heavy than it was here at Daytona?
Well, having been to Road America in real life and having seen how that track can change with the weather, it really depends on the track temperature, right? A cold track is not going to be very setup dependent, and you're going to have a lot of grip throughout the track as the day develops, but a hot track is going to be even more difficult, and just like today, that's where for the Porsches, it's really going to rely on the setup, Ron.
Alrighty, we're definitely going to see some setups play a big role in that race in 1 week's time at Road America. Now, before we let you go for this evening here at Daytona, is there anyone you want to give a thanks to or shout out?
Oh yeah, I just want to give a thanks to everybody at Operation Motorsports, definitely Tiffany, Tyler Gilla-Matt, and Greg Meismer. Without them, I wouldn't be in this program, and without them, I wouldn't be doing this amazing racing with all of these wonderful people and all of these amazing competitors who are very, very talented, Ron.
Well, there you go, Peter. Thank you for joining us in the commentary booth, and excited to see you back out on the racetrack at Road America in 1 week's time. Thanks for joining us, man.
Thanks, Ron. Can't wait.
There we go, and that was Peter McDade, who ends up this race P2 in the pro. Actually, that's not the pro. I believe it was the beneficiary category. When everything was said and done, a hard-fought afternoon from him. And Charles, who do you like to have a chat with next?
Well, let's go back to the LMP2s, and we'll talk to Greg Meismer, and we'll get his take on it. Greg, 6 cars in the LMP2 field, so you finished 6th place, but you had some really good battles on track with Gilmet and Wallace during the course of that race, and it seemed like it just, for whatever reason, just kind of fell apart after the pit stop. So what do you think from your perspective was the deal?
The slowdowns on the entry to the bus stop were brutal. They were absolutely brutal. I don't know why I kept getting them. I think Tyler got a couple at the same lap I did. And then I locked up and got into E in one of the GT3s, and that just that messed me all up. But it's looking to be a good fight between me and Tyler for the remainder of the season. At least I hope so, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's what we were seeing, and obviously we talked with Tyler earlier, and there was a lot of course, fuel saving going on, because that's what you do at Daytona when you're running these races, is you just try and maximize your fuel usage. So, you guys were pretty content. You were tight together, but not necessarily lots and lots of battles through corners. Just trying to keep your fuel maximized and try and get ready for the end of the race.
Yep. Tyler and I have been racing together for a couple of years now, so I have a lot of trust in him on track. I kind of know where I can push and where he's going to push and things like that. So it makes for a fun race every time we hit the track together.
Absolutely. So I'll go ahead and give you the same opportunity to give thanks and shouts out.
I gotta give thanks to my team, ZFG Racing. They've been awesome in supporting me. Also, Operation Motorsport, Core Motorsports, everybody involved in everything that we do over here. Just big thanks to all you guys and those that support us. So and you guys as well. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Craig. We'll see you next week at Road America.
Awesome. Thank you.
And that was Greg Meismer, who came up second in that Pro Beneficiary LMP2 fight. Certainly put down a fight for sure. He was trading blows all throughout that race. And we got one more driver waiting in the interview waiting area, that being Elliott Whitfield. We'll have a quick little chat before we look forward to the next race of the season. And now, Elliott, thank you for joining us here in the commentary booth here on Apex Racing TV. Pretty hard-fought afternoon from drivers up and down the field, afternoon/evening, depending on what time it is for you. So how was it at Daytona tonight?
It was pretty good. The So I just pretty much just tried to run my pace, and then I just used the strategy to pit closer to the end of the fuel window. So as the race went on, I just tried to keep the same pace. Of course, I got caught up in different places, letting some of the faster class by, but I just tried to stay consistent and run the same pace, and I ended up P3.
I mean, hey, a podium ain't too bad when everything was said and done for the 45-minute race here to kick this season off at Daytona. And now in 1 week's time, we're going to be running at a far different track, that being Road America. How do you think that race is going to be from your end in 1 week's time?
For me, I don't have a lot of time on that track, so this week coming up is gonna try to get in as much practice as I can, just to kind of learn it and have it kind of memorized, know the certain spots. Then try to just figure out, do I, come up with some kind of strategy, kind of see what everybody times are, and then try to figure out how I'm gonna run the race. Either am I gonna pit early, middle, closer to the end. So we'll see how it go.
Strategy definitely going to play a big role in that race in 1 week's time. Now, before we let you go and give you the opportunity to celebrate your podium result when everything was said and done here at Daytona, is there anyone you want to give a thanks to or shout out?
Of course, Operation Motorsport for continuing to put this on. It's just cool to be able to do this from home, and some of the other beneficiaries I've met along the way and actually met in person, and now we get to just race together online and stuff, and it's pretty cool. Thank my wife for being supportive. She let me get a whole new setup over the summer, so this is my first time racing in my new setup. I just want to thank everybody that tuned in, and thank you guys for calling the race and showing it.
Alrighty, well, thank you for the kind words, Elliot, and really happy to hear that you're breaking in the new sim rig here from their Operation eMotorsport series. Congratulations on the result this evening, and excited to see you back out on track at Road America in 1 week's time. Thanks for joining us, man.
All right, no problem. Thanks.
And that was Elliot Whitfield in that Corvette. Put on a pretty hard-fought show from start to finish in this race. And now, Charles, we asked these drivers a lot of the same questions, mainly talking about how the racing action is going to be at Road America in 1 week's time. So I figured I'd give you equal treatment and ask you the same question as well. How do you think that race is going to be? I think that's going to be fun. What about you?
Oh, I think it's going to be fun. And now that I've got my GPS configured properly, I know that we're going to be at Road America next week. Instead of Sebring, as I said earlier. No, it's a great track. Obviously, straight line speed is going to be very, very important. But that track is one of those tracks that you definitely need to have your setup right. There are some technical sections that will catch you out if you're not careful. Some heavy braking zones that you have to really get a lot of practice to get those just right. And of course, we always say when you're at Road America, especially multi-class racing, don't pass in the kink. So that's going to be the key. My guess is we'll see a few cars off there during the course of the race, because we always do. Because that's just, when racers race, they see a gap. They said, "Oh, that gap is mine," and then we'll worry about consequences later. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a fantastic race. I love Road America. I love racing there as well. So yeah, I'm looking forward to calling the action next week.
Yeah, there's going to be a whole different basket of challenges for those drivers, whether it be the point you brought up, Charles, of managing that traffic all throughout that race, whether it be managing the strategy that Elliot Whitfield brought up, or whether it be trying to cook up a good setup for regardless of what kind of car you're running in. That is going to be a big basket of challenges that the drivers will have to try and unpack for Road America in 1 week's time, and you can catch all the action here on Apex Racing TV. And of course, none of this would not be possible if it weren't for the wonderful support that we have, and mainly Operation Motorsports. Of course, we talked about this earlier on in the broadcast, and we will mention it again. Operation Motorsports is a veteran-led and operated 501c3 nonprofit foundation based in Raleigh, North Carolina, and Bryan, Ontario, Canada, serving American and Canadian service members and veterans as well. Operation Motorsports is based on 3 core values: team, identity, and purpose, and supports the recovery of medically retiring or retired service members affected by military service through motorsports operations opportunities. Operation Motorsport's motto is one at a time. So if you ever see hashtag one at a time, now you know the meaning behind that hashtag on the wonderful cause supporting all these veterans. Veteran recovery opportunities, utilizing motorsports opportunities, veteran recovery opportunities that instill a sense of team identity, purpose, veteran recovery opportunities through the lens of diversion therapy, motorsports immersion, and academy programs. Veteran recovery through motorsports one at a time. Visit operationmotorsports.org to learn more, and we've kind of hinted around this a little bit. Operation Motorsports has some wonderful partners that work alongside them. CrowdStrike is one of them, one of the proud partners of Operation Motorsports to advance their mission of empowering military veterans through motorsports. Their support extends far beyond traditional funding, addressing critical business needs and enabling Operation Motorsports to focus on key engagements, outreach, and expanding veteran opportunities as well. This foundational support ensures that Operation Motorsports can effectively deliver its programs and create meaningful experiences for veterans in the racing world. And on top of the valued support of CrowdStrike, Advanced Sim Racing is committed to supporting Operation Motorsports through generous contributions to their fundraising efforts and programs. In 2023, ASR donated a high-quality sim rig to Operation Motorsports Giving Tuesday online auction to help raise some funds for their impactful initiatives. And they'll also be contributing 2 additional sim rigs for the upcoming 2024 Giving Tuesday auction, furthering supporting Operation Motorsports' mission to providing veterans with exciting opportunities in the world of motorsports. It's fantastic to have some wonderful partners helping Operation Motorsports do what they do best, and also putting on some pretty good racing as well. Tonight was one of it, and at Daytona we were expecting some intense racing, and we certainly got it, whether it be a clinic being put on the field in the beneficiary GT3 class or a hard-fought fight all the way to the checkered flag in the Pro LMP2 field. It was a fantastic night of racing action, and we're really happy to have you all on board here on Apex Racing TV for not just this race meeting, but the rest of the race meetings we have from now all the way until the end of October before this first race of this brand new season and brand new adventure here on Apex Racing TV. That will just about do it. And so for myself, Ron Mullins, Charles Bichelle joining me in the commentary booth, and Lee Thompson doing a wonderful job working all the cameras in the virtual production hauler, I say thank you all so very much for watching. Have a great rest of your night, and I'll see you all again at Road America in 1 week's time. Take care, everybody.